Please. Okay, got it. Okay, let's start. We are continuing with our MDI 007. Just there is a particular. Just, okay, we were doing MDI 007, which are theories of labor and labor markets. And I thought before we take the next unit, unit 8 or unit 7 on neoclassical economics, I thought let's do a recap. Again, if you are not a student of economics, the unit might be a little confusing because there is a whole lot of economic theory and economic terms which are being used. I have tried to keep this unit simple so that non-economic students can also understand. So if you're a non-economic students, understand the gist of it. The reason why this whole MDI 007 is talking about theories of labor and labor market is because of the fact it is because of labor migration, unemployment, a higher wage that the migration happens. The largest part of migration happens. And migration then leads to diaspora. So understanding how labor and labor markets function is, the basic objective of, keeping this MDI 007 there. Uh, Again, as I said, do not get stuck with the economic, part of the explanation if you're a non-economic student. Try and understand the larger aspect of why this is being talked about. So I thought let's start this by doing just a recap. We in unit 1 talked about basic concepts of growth and development, growth being quantitative, and more often than not, if you see, because it is quantitative and can be then worked upon by mathematical models. That's why most of the time in mainstream media you would hear about economic growth because it's quantitative. There are numbers. The numbers can be manipulated. You can see it going up or down. It's easy to understand. One can divide nations into rich, middle, poor income by per capita GNP. GNP has a particular definition. However, development, on the other hand, is both quantitative and qualitative. Now, qualitative is always difficult to measure. When one says that I have grown once, let's say, if I was to say we have grown our knowledge in migration and diaspora, how do we quantify this growth? More often than not, then we go through a system of examination where we then quantify that knowledge into right answers and say, yes, there is a increase of knowledge. We know that fact. It's not a very perfect way of measuring knowledge or understanding of a subject. However, development aims at economic, social, and political well-being of people. We also have read in units that inevitably labor is direct is an embodiment of the human being. You cannot separate labor from the human being which performs that labor. That's why the concept of development becomes very important to understand. Again, there is no single definition or prescription of development. Concept has evolved. In the unit 1, we had read about various forms of development indices that have come about, the Human Development Index, the PQLI, and so on and so forth. Labor is a central element in development. All goods and services we consume, we possess, all the facilities are all a product of labor. And labor is directly from the human being. You cannot separate labor and human being. Emergence and development of communities are all linked to the contribution of labor. And inevitably, that's why labor becomes a very important part. And that's why there is a whole, subject in this migration and diaspora, set, which is devoted to labor and labor markets. For people who have joined for the first time, Again, you can stop me at any moment of time to ask a question or to add a value. A lot of you people have experiential, knowledge. So, you can share that knowledge, something that, you have read or come across, and you can stop me at any moment of time by either raising a hand or just interrupting. The idea is when we exchange, and for people who are joining for the first time, in this class, we try and share perspectives. And inevitably, in academic and scholarly pursuits, there's no right, wrong, good, bad. These are all perspectives. And that is why a lot of times, citing scholars is important, because citing gives as to whose perspective is it. In common parlance, labor is often used to denote lowest rung of workers, which is manual. However, holistic approach includes those manually or intellectually in a society into cat. Everything that we do, whether it's physical or intellectual, is labor. For people who are joining late, we are doing MDI 007, labor and labor markets. This whole subject on labor and labor market is extremely economic centric. So in case you are not a student, you have not been a student of economics, the units, the self-learning modules might be a little, dense, because they have a lot of, formulas or charts, which may be very difficult to understand for a non-economic student. So what I try and do is I try and simplify this presentation, which again goes on a YouTube channel. You can always ask me for the PPT by sending me a mail. Now, in fact, I'm on WhatsApp also. I was not on WhatsApp earlier, so you can send me a request on WhatsApp. I can send you the PPT. And we are, these are some of the earlier units that we have done. I am doing a recap. Labor as a unique factor of production, because it's got a dual role of contribution as well. Not only the labor produces items or goods or services, but it's the labor which consumes them also. While the first role of labor has been widely recognized, it's only on the later stage that demand generation capacity of labor. So there has been a lot of media talk about welfare economics, especially when political parties or state government give welfareism or things which seem to be free. There is a term which we use called freebies. Now, the interesting part in terms of when you look at the economic part of it, whenever there is welfareism, for example, Delhi government and I think also Karnataka today offers free rides to women commuters. Now think about the fact it might look as a freebie or a welfareism, but every time a woman in a household saves, let's say, 20 to 50 rupees in terms of the travel ticket, that 50 rupees is used for some other item of consumption. Money more often than can be used in two ways. It can be consumed or it can be saved. More often than not, money is saved only after the basic things of consumption are done. In fact, the very existence of human being, you need various things to consume: food, clothing, shelter. After this is done, then people save. That's the generic model. So there is a dual role of contribution of labor in economics. Understand that demand for labor is a sort of derived demand, highly dependent on the demand for goods and services that have been produced. And these are very interlinked with each other. If there is not enough money, there will not be enough demand. If there will not be enough demand, the production will come down. They are all linked. Then, in earlier units, we read about labor in economics, basically concerns with factors that influence labor supply, demand, and So, since the time of the Industrial Revolution, the focus has been to study labor and labor markets and how do various factors influence them. Its primary preoccupation has to give an explanation of wages, including factors that influence general level of wages, reason for wage differential between different occupation industries. So a lot of economists have been trying to study this, trying to come up with theories, trying to find solutions to why there is this fluctuations in the market. Also, labor is not a commodity in the same sense as other inputs in the process of production, such as land and machinery. You can keep exchanging land, machinery, but labor is something you cannot keep exchanging. It cannot be bought and sold. Rather the services of a worker providing labor can be hired or rented out. And the interesting part of labor is that it is determined on human emotion because it is an embodiment of the human being. Uh, so if the human being providing the labor is dissatisfied or his minimum needs are not fair met, the labor will not be of a particular quality. However, the sale of their services is determined by a host of factors, not merely the monetary ones. And that makes the labor part extremely tricky. Forms of labor and experience of worker are the product of production relationship and nature of development. And the human being experiences a small percentage of workers are better paid, avail benefits of protective labor law, collective bargaining. These are all unit 1 to 6, what we have studied earlier. So I'm just doing a recap because a lot of new people are joining this class. So I thought it was good to, do a recap. Then early modern labor, 1500 to 1790s, the world economy went through commercialization, militarization, monetization. In fact, in the unit is also earlier units is also described how the concept of money came about from the earlier barter system. How when the economy started getting specialized, there was a division of labor. Expansion of market led to a greater division of labor, improvement in productivity, specialization of labor, and how you were able to quantify various items in terms of their value. And that is the reason why, the system of money, starting with silver coins, brass coins, iron coins, precious materials, leading to paper money came about. Uh, Then the first economic theory to hit the block to understand how these things work was the classical economics or the classical economic theory, which had the concept of laissez-faire, which is non-interference of government. The early economists were of the view that the government should not interfere into the way the economy was run or the market was run because there was a supply and demand, and inevitably the supply demand stabilized the market. There were two laws in the classical economics: the Say's laws of market and the wage price flexibility and full employment. In fact, the classical economics believe the fact that there can never be involuntary unemployment based on the supply and demand. So that was the basic classical economics, which was the mainstay in terms of economic theory to start with. Uh, the classical economics was not able to explain a lot of things. Then there were all these fluctuations in the market, and Karl Marx came about. His work on capitalism. He believed the fact that capitalism was a way of exploitation of people, exploitation of labor. So Marxism as a theory came about, locates labor within capitalism. Labor is understood as in fact, because labor is associated with human beings, and inevitably, these are how theories looked at how labor movement happened or how capitalism happened. So, there were these two alternate viewpoints or the, various ways the world was moving. One was the capitalist American model, and the other was the Marxist Soviet model. Both were working parallelly, and both had its drawbacks. Marx labor is located in specific stages of history. This is again an earlier unit. And then we come to unit 7, the neoclassical approach to labor. So that's the unit for today. I thought it was very important to give a backdrop as to why we are talking about this neoclassical approach. So, what is the neoclassical approach? Again, as I said, the SLM, the self-learning module, has a lot of economic, charts and formulas. So, if you are a non-economic student, do not get confused in all those charts and and theorems. Try and keep taking keywords out of it. I have simplified the SLM in terms of this PPT. Pick up keywords, and if you want to read more, you can read more. Do not get stuck with the economic explanation, because unless you have a basic degree on economics, you will get stuck. The idea is to understand that labor influences the larger migration patterns. People move in terms of jobs, people move in terms of better life. Better life is in terms of employment, and that is why we are studying all this. Objective is to understand key concepts that shape neoclassical approach. Again, as I said, I've simplified it tremendously. Introduction, also known as the marginalist theory, emerged in the late 19th century as a response to the perceived limitation of classical theory. So, classical theory was about supply and demand, non-interference of government, and their focus was on surplus. But it was not able to explain, why there were fluctuations in the market, why, assuming the fact that in a perfect market of supply and demand, why there was unemployment. Whereas classical theory premise the fact that in a supply demand situation there can never be an involuntary unemployment, whereas unemployment was there. So the movement from classical to neoclassical economic theory grew from the work of William Stanley Jevon, Karl Menger, dominant texts being Principles of Economics written by Alfred Marshall, early 1900s. These are early 1900s. In fact, the world has moved significantly since early 1900s. One most important fact which has happened is globalization and the revolution in terms of transportation. And globalization was revolution in terms of transportation and communication. That has made all of us connected with the rest of the world. Neoclassical economists believe that the consumer's first concern is to maximize personal satisfaction, also known as utility. In philosophy, there is a utilitarian model, something similar to this, where everybody tries and maximizes what is called utility, making purchase decision based on their evaluation of utility of a product and service, which actually, if you start relating to yourself, whenever you buy something, you not only look at the price of the thing, but how there is a utility of those things to your life. This theory coincides with the rational behavior theory, which states that people act rationally when making economic decisions. Now, subsequently, we have also seen that people actually are not rational and there is an emotional factor, but that's a subsequent thing. During neoclassical theory, or when the economists were talking about the neoclassical theory, they assumed the fact that human beings were rational when making economic decisions. Neoclassical economics stipulates that products or services often has value above and beyond its production cost. If you look at, in relation to yourself, when you are in this class, when you look at product buying, you will see that in a lot of cases, when you buy stuff, let's say you buy a new car, or you buy a new house, or you buy a new TV, you not only look at the price, but you look at, let's say, a brand. You look at the brand gives you, it's a marginal utility which the brand talks about the comfort, or it gives you an assurance that this particular product adheres to some quality standards and will give you long service. That's a marginal utility you look at. While classical economic theory assumes that a product's value derives from the cost of material plus cost of labor, neoclassical say that the consumer perception of the value of the product affects its price and demand. So there's a very interesting story about the Apollo hospitals. It's an anecdotal tale, but I'd heard it from a lot of people. When Apollo opened its Delhi branch and kept its prices similar to its original parent company in Chennai, the prices were low. And then they were told that in Delhi, if the prices are low, people think the quality is not good. It's an anecdotal tale. There is no way I can prove this, whether this actually happened, unless you go and do some research. But this was anecdotally told to me by a medical professional. So Apollo Delhi jacked up its prices to match the Delhi standards, and it's a success thing today. So about the value of product affecting its price and demand. Finally, it states that the competition leads to an efficient allocation of resources within an economy. The forces of supply and demand create market equilibrium, which was something very similar to what the classical economics also talked about. And we will see subsequently the neoclassical was an extension of the classical economics. I hope I'm not going too fast, guys. Guys, can you hear my voice?
Yes, not too fast at all.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Broadly speaking, from Investopedia, I picked up this, visual broad theory that focuses on supply and demand as the driving forces behind the production, pricing, and consumption of goods and services. Neoclassical economics. Main elements. Main assumption are consumers make rational decisions to maximize utility. Businesses aim to maximize profit. So in case in your examination there is write short notes on neoclassical economics, you can put this point wise. It's easy to remember, and it's easy to write it in an examination. I'm also we look at things from multiple angles. One angle is, of course, to you have joined this course to get a degree, and for getting a degree you need to clear an examination, you need to write an answer, and so forth. But the second larger objective is to understand the aspect of migration and diaspora, and labor becomes a very important aspect. Businesses aim to maximize profits. People act independently based on having all relevant information related to. And as you read this, you will see that there is naturally, you can bring out criticism in these points. But remember, this was a theory in the 1900s that markets will self-regulate in response to supply and demand. Main assumptions. So key attributes: marginal analysis introduces the concept of marginal analysis, incremental changes in cost and benefits. Individual makes decisions based on marginal utility they derive from each additional unit of goods and services. A brand becomes a marginal utility. So if two TVs are, let's say TV A is of 25,000 and TV B is of 20,000, the marginal utility, or let's say A and B are of 25,000 each. If A is of a brand like Toshiba and B is a local brand, you will derive a marginal utility out of the Toshiba brand or a Samsung brand. That's a marginal utility. Subjective value. Based on marginal utility, there is a subjective value. And unlike classical theory, emphasizes the subjective value of goods and services, how the consumer perceives it, by an individual preference and utility rather than labor required to produce it. Perfect competition. It's an attribute of neoclassical theory. Assume perfect competition in markets. We know today there is never a perfect competition in market, but at that time, 1900s, remember when the theory was being conceptualized, Many buyers and sellers, homogeneous products, and free entry and exit. Assumption allows for analysis of equilibrium prices and quantities. Consumer and product producer surplus. Consumer surplus represents the difference between price a consumer is willing to pay and the actual price. While producer surplus, difference between the price a producer receives and the minimum price they're willing to accept. Very typically, when you go to, let's say, a flea market, a market like in Delhi, for example, Sarojini Nagar or Lajpat Nagar, you go and see the wares of the vendors in that flea market or the, that ready market, what we call, and you perceive a price and the seller is quoting a price and then you negotiate. So that's where what comes is consumer surplus and producer surplus. Market failure, unlike classical theory, neoclassical theory recognizes possibility of market failures. Though again, they talk about the fact that in a perfect supply-demand situation, there should not be any market failure. But one of the attributes they say is government intervention required in case there's a market failure. So what is the difference between classical and neoclassical? Both are distinct theories, shape the field of economics. Classical theory emphasizes the role of free markets and invisible hand in determining the supply and demand. The supply and demand would automatically correct the market, argues that individuals act in their own self-interest, leading to efficient allocation of resources. That's the classical one. Whereas the neoclassical emerged in late 19th century, focuses on behavior of individuals and firms in response to change in prices, aim to explain market equilibrium. Focuses on economic growth, neoclassical focuses on relative prices and allocation of given set of resources. By far, they are the same. Both share a belief in efficiency of market. Neoclassical theory incorporates more sophisticated mathematical model, deeper in the understanding of individual decision making. That is why it's neoclassical, a newer classical economics. By far, they are same, but of these, differences in terms of more sophisticated mathematical models and efficiency of market, both believe in. Now, how does rewarding labor in neoclassical framework work? What is called the marginal productivity theory are based on marginal productivity, additional value that contribute to the production. If a worker helps produce more goods or services, their wage reflects that increased contribution. Overtime, the concept of overtime. Equilibrium wages are determined in competitive labor market. Supply and demand intersect. Lots of people want work. High supply, not enough jobs, wages may decrease. Inevitably, both theories talk about the supply demand. And inevitably, the supply demand will make an equilibrium in the market. Then they talk about human capital. Workers invest in skills and education to increase their productivity. Those with higher skills or education earn higher wages because they can produce more value for employees. And think about the fact that today also a lot of our normative understanding of careers is to get a higher skill by getting another degree, because that's how quantitatively employers find out whether you are higher skilled or not, by a degree. So somewhere down the line, if you see, you can, when you study history and various things in the historical concepts, you can understand today. Competition among employers. Employers compete for workers, which help drive wages up. If one company offers higher wages, attract more qualified workers, pushing other employers to raise their wages as well. So that's how rewarding labor in neoclassical framework happened. And inevitably, there were critics. Whenever there is a theory, there's a critique to that theory. So what were the critiques? Let's look at the critique part of it. Assumption of perfect information. Now, we know for sure that information is never perfect. Neoclassical economics assumes that everyone has access to all the relevant information. when making decision. In fact, today, even with the advent of internet and all information being available to all, we know there is nothing called perfect information, because also understand about human biases. There is a human psychology at play which works on concept of human biases. We tend to believe what we tend to believe. We will believe only in what we tend to believe. So irrespective of the fact, today when internet is there and just about all kinds of information is there, we still see that perfect information is not available. Rational behavior. Again, rational behavior, we have seen subsequently that human beings also have a large component of emotional behavior or emotional component while deciding. People always act rationally and make decisions maximizing their utility. However, people often make emotional or irrational choices that don't align with this idea. More often than not, we have seen the whole concept of advertising works on emotional behavior, not rational. So if you are able to take people onto the emotional trip, then inevitably rationalism takes a takes a takes a hike, as they would say. Then, of course, it ignores inequality, tends to overlook issues of inequality in income and wealth distribution, fully doesn't fully address how power dynamics and structural factors can influence wages and influence. And for new students, as you will go through various earlier blocks of subjects or earlier units, we will realize that more often than not, no two human beings are identical. No communities, no societies, no nations are homogeneous. There are inequalities, there are hierarchical ways in which societies are structured. The whole concept of a homogeneous migrant, or a homogeneous diaspora is just not there. Focus on individualism. The approach emphasizes individual decision making, ignores the importance of social and more again. When you would go through earlier units, again, I'm giving a curtain raiser. Our decision making, more often than not, a lot of times is not on an individual basis but on an institutional basis. So for example, look at the fact voting patterns in a democracy which is over 75 years old is still based on institutional factors like caste, religions, ethnicity, subcaste, etc., etc. Then static analysis. Critics argue that neoclassical economics focus on equilibrium states, does not adequately consider how economies change over time and how these react to shocks such as financial crisis. And especially in today's time, and as I was giving an example in one of the earlier classes, the Russian Ukraine conflict has led to the economies of many countries, on the brink. For example, Argentina in South America is facing a major economic meltdown because the price of food grains have gone up. Now, with this Middle Eastern conflict, everybody is on a tenterhook because, for a simple reason, remember, the Suez Canal is under attack. Middle East produces a large amount of oil, which runs the economy of the world, and anything can influence anything else. There is a chaos theory which works, anything can
So you
influence
mean the Red Sea?
the yeah, the Suez Canal. Aisha,
Yes, sir.
is that Aisha?
Yes, it is.
Uh-huh. I was talking about the Red Sea Suez Canal, the route which most of the oil tankers and the cargo ships take.
Okay, I thought they were different. I thought there were two different ones.
Okay. For example, we saw the fact that when there was a Russian blockade in the Black Sea, the Ukrainian grain, which was typically exported using those Ukrainian ports, could not come out, leading to rise of food grains, and which affects economies around. Today, if you see the stock markets, one particular stock market start to fall, there is a ripple effect for no particular reason. Overemphasis on the markets assumes that markets are always efficient and self-correcting, which may not be that which may not be true during economic distress. For example, in one of the in Unit 9, when we talk about the Keynesian economics, there was this Great Depression in the 30s. There was already also a major financial meltdown in 2008. Thankfully, India did not get affected because we were headed by an economist as a prime minister who was able to steer this country. But the last large part of Western world faced a lot of when a lot of big companies like Lehman Brothers went down. But the Great Depression of 1930s, we'll read about those Great Depression of 1930s in Unit 9. Simplification of labor issues. Labor market dynamics are often simplified, failing to account factors like discrimination, job security, role of unions, which can affect wages in employment. We need to understand that these theories came about when industrialization had just come about. Then there was this Great Depression. Before the Depression, the neoclassical theory came about. So, economists were trying to understand the process of globalizations were already kicking in. And people, economists were trying to make sense of the world economy and how, how these theories help policy formulation by nation states. Treatment of labor as commodity, both classical and neoclassical in terms of supply demand, actually try to classify labor as a commodity, a homogeneous good with identical units, which facilitates attainment of labor market equilibrium. We know that is not true. Erroneous due to the fact that labor is an embodiment in human beings, and human beings are emotional, are affected by various things, and in fact, this was the start of the capitalism. In the capitalist model, everything which is produced is meant for sale. The only purpose of business is profits. That's how these normative factors were coming about, of labor being a commodity, so that the capitalists did not need to take care of the labor or provide decent living standards to the labor or to provide minimum wages. They only wanted labor to produce things and get profit. Labor cannot be treated with similar criteria of minimum cost, maximum productivity as used for inanimate inputs. And that is why subsequently the whole concept of growth was replaced with the concept of development. Because finally, at the end of the day, it's the human being. The story is about the human being. Distribution of resources. Resources distribution impacts how people make decisions, important differences, especially incomes from performing labor. This was a critique. Pursuit of profit is not only the best way for markets to function, as this can exacerbate inequality. I was reading this Dainik Bhaskar report just now about how in Bihar or UP, they are using, acid to convert potatoes, normal potatoes, into, they put those potatoes into the acid and then rub it with mud and bring it out and sell it as new potatoes, effectively making $20 profit per kg of potato. Now, pursuit of profit, we have also known is not, inevitably damages environment or so you can get profit, but it will damage communities. And if it damage communities, the same communities are the ones which purchase. And if you're going to damage the community, then who's going to purchase? Market or business structured around solving a problem such as non-profit organization or single player healthcare often functions with equal levels of efficiency. So they were focused on efficiency and effectiveness, but they had a single, way solution for that, the neoclassical approach. Aisha selling them as new potatoes. So there is something called Naya Aloo, new potatoes. The new potatoes typically, their skin are ruffled. If you see in the market, there is the old potato in which the skin is tight, and a new potato in which the skin is ruffled. So a part of the skin is coming off. So they put it in
Yep, yep.
acid so that the skin gets ruffled, and then they rub mud on it. I was reading this report in the newspaper.
Oh wow, I've never heard of this kind.
I was just reading this report.
Okay.
Things like adulterating milk with urea to produce more milk and sell it at a profit.
Wow.
Then things like puzzle over prevalence of unemployment. New classical again could not explain the prevalence of unemployment. If the market was so efficient with supply and demand, why was there unemployment? So erroneous assumption of perfect labor market. There is nothing called a perfect labor market. So these were the critiques of neoclassical. Let's sum it up. There is you have another class at 4 o'clock, so let me sum it up. Unlike classical economists, believe in the cost of production, state that prices should be based on how consumers perceive, also believe that consumers make rational decisions to maximize utility. Classical economists assume that most important factor is the product's price, argue that consumers' perception is the driving factor in price. Difference between actual production cost and retail price is economic surplus. I guess potato has to be cured. It needs to get thicker skin. They are stored in dark. Sayali, again, there are a lot of potatoes are today cold stored, but there is a difference between an old potato and a new potato. Again, it's a supply position from where these potatoes are coming in. So the new potatoes are the ones which are freshly, dug up and brought into the market. And more often than not, these new potatoes have a lot of mud on them. Their skin are ruffled. The skins are peeling off, and that's what is called new potatoes. And inevitably, they fetch a better price. Siali? My understanding of potato, because I do a little bit amount of vegetable gardening, and one of the products that I produce are potatoes.
Wow.
Yeah, I do a certain amount of vegetable gardening, so I have a fair amount of the pain of agriculturist, because the pests comes and I try and do an organic farming, no pesticide, no insecticide, and so on and so forth. Neoclassical.
That's really cool.
Thank you, thank you. So when my the winter produce starts to come up, I'll share the pictures with the class. And
Oh,
now I'm
please
on.
do.
Yeah, so I in the winters I grow tomatoes, I grow palak, methi, dhania. Then I have creepers on beans, seme. So quite a few things I'm able to grow. Sada sir does a lot of herb in his kitchen garden.
Wow.
These are, marginal utilities your teachers have. Okay. Critics argue theory does not account for other factors that impact consumer decisions, such as limited information, resource inequality, and emotional thinking. And there are some references in the unit. I've just picked up two. So if you, even if you Google and say neoclassical economics, you will come across more often than not, when you try and Google, you'll come up with a lot of, blog posts or again, websites which will explain you with an economic bent of mind. So unless you have an economics background, it becomes a little dense. As I said, that's why this PPT I have simplified. Let me stop share. Let me start my video. Hi guys. So in case you want the PPT, you can mail me at, let me share my mail ID. Hang on. Uh, You can send me a mail, and that's my phone number in case you want to get in touch with me. I'm also on WhatsApp now. I was earlier only on Telegram and Signal. Thanks, Vinod. I think you are saying nice for the vegetable gardening that I'm doing. Any question?
Yes, sir, of course.
Oh, thank you. In fact, Dr. Ani has joined us already. So if there is any question, please ask.
So just one question, Vinod here. Uh, it was an interesting topic where you were talking about labor and productivity, how it has been perceived over a period of time.
Yeah.
Um, I'm just wondering, with the AI coming into picture, how would that impact the whole labor or labor practices, or how we evaluate a labor productivity, and how
Oh,
it might impact migration as such?
okay. Vinod, I'll tell you a very interesting story about AI, and I think everybody should listen to this, and how the whole concept of AI is hyped in the present world. Uh, uh, So a couple of years back, Amazon came up, and you can Google this while I'm telling you this story. Amazon came up with this new feature where you could self checkout of stores. So you can go inside stores, you can pick up stuff, and you can self check out without needing to go to a counter or a cashier. And when you check out, that amount will be deducted from your Amazon balance or your bank account or whatever. Guys, you can parallelly Google check. So Amazon came out with this. Amazon did not say, they said that this was based on AI and smart devices and sensors and so on and so forth. Actually, they didn't say what was behind this particular scheme was 1,000 people in India which had been set up to using cameras to watch what the persons were buying, and they were manually checking out. So Vinod, understand one thing: AI only works when people, which is labor, data enters data. AI only works on data entry. The machines are able to understand various aspects on the data which is entered, and that data which is entered is done by manual labor. So this is the same way what happened when India started the computerization module. When India started computerization, the labor unions were very concerned about loss of jobs. Now, what typically happened is there were some loss of jobs, but then very quickly those jobs got assigned to associated with the computer industry. So inevitably, understand the story is about the human being. So AI, irrespective of all the fancy terminology, comes about, involves computers, it involves a whole lot of data entry, a whole lot of jobs are getting realigned. Vinod?
Yes, sir, I think that was a good perspective. And do you see this triggering some sort of migration pattern or something? Will it change?
So what typically is happening is you would need to reskill yourself in different aspects. Say, for example, when computers came in, initial set of people, and if you see today, people in their 70s and 80s are extremely wary of computerization because they did not reskill themselves in computers. So today's job market involves understanding or reskilling on a very fast note. And inevitably, that's where state or government interventions will be required because the way of changes in the labor market, which, say, for example, we have moved from an industrial factory complex or a conveyor belt kind of a system into personalized products. Look at the way the fashions are changing. Now, inevitably, you would need people to quickly understand how, and that's where computers come in to be able to, and computers will add to the value of the human beings. Computers cannot take it on its own. Remember, there is always a person working with that computer. And every time you will have a computer to work on it, we have not reached that stage. We would need human intervention. So people would need to be reskilled. So if you see already the whole concept of digital diaspora involves diasporas, which so today I can go to Dubai, get a visa, and sit there, not be a citizen or and have a digital diaspora and work for an American company sitting in Dubai. It's a whole new ball game which is happening, Vinod.
Thank you, sir.
Does it make sense what I said, Vinod?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I was wondering how um, how it is going to evolve from a migration pattern
So
perspective.
obviously, you need to reskill. See, certain work, for example, AI cannot do fishing. AI cannot do mining. It might help the people do efficient things efficiently, but again, where there is going to be, where there is going to be, a deft requirement of labor, it's going to be the human beings.
Mm.
Computers, machinery, technology always help a person do the job better.
Of course, of course. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any other question? Okay, if there are no other questions, then I think I will pass on. Firoz, do I pass on the baton to you or to Dr.
No,
Anupit?
I'm taking the host, so I'll do the
Okay,
YouTube thing, then I'll make Annie the host.
ठीक है, perfect. So you can reclaim the host from